Welcome to Worlds Collide. Please comment, like, and subscribe to my channel to be updated on more content.
Chapter 17. New Horizons. Reports from Mitchel began arriving 3 months later. Initially, they offered routine updates. We've reached the Kuiper Belt, or initial scans for large bodies complete. Most findings involved icy rocks with trace amounts of valuable alloys, though heavy water, essential for nuclear fission, abounded. If included with more valuable resources, it could fuel a viable business back on Earth. Iron also surfaced frequently in larger asteroids, proving useful for constructing new stations. The most intriguing data revealed a massive gravitational force. Its irregular elliptical orbit tugged at some asteroids, pulling them into tighter clusters. The Kuiper Belt appeared to be a bust. Similar meager reports poured in weekly, and after months of this, I nearly abandoned the idea when iron and nickel alloys finally emerged. They were sporadic at first, then became a regular occurrence. 6 months into the survey, Mitchel sent word that he was returning for resupply and to conduct detailed scans of the outer 2 planets and their moons. They'd shifted focus to surveying moons after the Kuiper Belt yielded less than optimal resource output. Their return to the station was still nearly 2 months away. Chiari's growth accelerated for me. Her eyes, the color of translucent emeralds that gleamed with the intensity of small suns when she focused, finally opened 5 weeks after her birth. They weren't sharp initially, perceiving no more than a couple feet away. By 3 months, she already moved around our quarters on shaky arms and legs. I found the sight of her attempting to run on all fours both curious and funny. Crathen, according to Fre, mastered movement on all fours before adopting bipedal locomotion. By the time Mitchel returned to the station, Chiari had begun running, albeit unsteadily. Oftentimes, when she accelerated faster than she could control, she'd tumble head over heels trying to decelerate. Turning was definitely out of the question once she achieved faster-than-crawl speed. I met Mitchel at the docking bay the moment the doors parted. "Welcome home," I greeted him with a genuine, toothless smile. We grasped forearms, a gesture I'd demonstrated to him before his departure. "Fre's eager to hear from you and has prepared dinner in anticipation." "I never knew she cooked," Mitchel responded humorously. My grin reached my eyes as I gestured for him to follow. "She doesn't," I intoned, "but she has attempted to do so for your benefit." Chiari greeted us at the door, striving to stand erect using the wall for support. "Da!" she half spat and growled in sequence. She started to reach for me but froze when she saw Mitchel standing beside me. I swear I witnessed her scowl as her fur stood on end, making her appear twice her size. Only after some gentle encouragement did she calm, though she still eyed her great-uncle warily. "Wow!" Mitchel exclaimed at the sight. "She's grown since I last saw her. Has her mother's temperament too." Apparently, vocal observations of child development weren't unique to humans. I'm at a loss as to where her coloring originated. "It's not a Crathen trait." I nodded. "Both my mother and my grandmother on my father's side had red hair, though not that shade," I confessed. Fre emerged from the dining room and bumped her head against her uncle's in a familial greeting. "Welcome home, Uncle." We settled at the table shortly after. It took a moment to wrangle Chiari, distracting her with puzzles made from printed blocks that glowed different colors when assembled correctly. Dinner conversation primarily revolved around the delivery of the latest ship and the addition of survey probes into the next ship, scheduled to begin test flights within a few months. Only after dinner did Mitchel begin his debrief on the current resource dilemma. He lifted a holographic projector and placed it on the table. It bloomed to life, displaying images of mostly white and gray asteroids. The outer asteroids consist of mostly ice and various gases unsuited for our current needs. There are some ores within their cores, but not in the quantities we need. Fre's ears dipped slightly in distress. "So they're useless to us?" "Not exactly," Mitchel countered. "There's a large quantity of water ice we can utilize to supply a station and ships. What's particularly interesting are some of the moons orbiting the outer 2 planets." The image shifted, showing Neptune and its 17 moons. The largest is encapsulated in a thick layer of ice, but we've detected large deposits of various ores, mostly iron and nickel, but also titanium. There's enough here to make mining worthwhile. It could definitely provide enough ore to construct a small station with one, possibly two production facilities. He keyed in a new sequence and Jupiter replaced Neptune. Our best option, in my opinion, lies around the fifth planet. It boasts nearly 100 moons of varying size and or makeup. It would also be the easiest place to conceal a modest station and accommodate the production of a couple medium shipyards. We could establish a static orbit that would shield us from Earth's satellites. Could we build the station inside one of the moons? I inquired. Maybe even the shipyard? Both gazed at me quizzically. Humans harbor a particular interest in Jupiter. It would be easier to hide within a known moon than creating a new one that might accidentally be picked up by a passing satellite. Mersch considered it for a few minutes before nodding. I think we could. The reflective ice shells might also help mask our presence. What kind of timeline do we face? Shay asked. Hoshka believes we could begin importing resources from Fekkai to commence construction within the year. He studied his notes thoughtfully. We could possibly be fully operational within 4 Earth orbital cycles, possibly less. Any information on the golden asteroid? We required revenue from rare ores if we wish to accelerate our timeline. Earth scientists had been studying it greedily since its discovery. The good deposit was estimated in the trillions, but the real value was in the electronic application. That we were able to locate fairly quickly. He reached into the breast pocket of his uniform and tossed a golden nugget about the size of a marble onto the table. We were able to extract a sample of about 1,000 kilograms by Earth standard weight. I blinked in astonishment. I didn't anticipate that much, honestly. We could easily construct a moderately sized compound with that much. Mershi checked his data before looking back at me. The asteroid comprises approximately 4% gold, 2.6% platinum, 1.3% palladium, 18% nickel, and 23% iron, he read aloud. The rest consists of silicates and other various compounds. I think we should proceed, I said, seeking Shay's approval. She flicked an ear in acknowledgement. I agree. Go ahead and commence extraction on the outer moons of Jupiter. Yes, Miktar. Mersch tapped the screen of his tablet. We can utilize the caverns left from the mining to build the station. Mersch departed after 3 hours of refining details. Rare ores from the golden asteroid would be quietly extracted, carefully so as not to betray our operations. Mining would begin on the moons of Jupiter within the next 5 months. Plans for Shay and me to return to Earth would commence in a month's time. I would return planetside to acquire land for construction, while our team would land Odin's messenger on the backside of the moon in one of the many unremarkable craters, awaiting any possible emergency extraction. Chiari, of course, would accompany us on the mission and remain with her mother aboard the cruiser. We sat in the common room, leaning against each other in silence once Chiari was asleep. No words were needed to express our worry. I would be heading home, dodging the military and the multitude of questions that no doubt awaited me, along with prison. Plans were in place to scrub American computers of my existence. Fingerprints, military records, and police records would be easy, but my social security number and photo would be another issue altogether if flagged in the right system. So many alphabet agencies existed, it was difficult to identify them all. No backup would come from the Krathan governments if I were arrested. Shay and her people would be my only support. Thankfully, Chiari no longer woke several times a night to be fed. She simply rested peacefully once asleep until about 6 a.m. ship time, which worked fine for me since I needed to be up early each day to tour facilities and attend meetings about any possible concerns requiring either Shay's or my attention. Tonight, whether sensing our concern or for whatever reason a child wakes, she staggered into the room and crawled into her mother's lap, stretching out across us both, her head in my lap. She purred softly when I casually stroked the fur on her head. Shay just smiled an almost human smile and nuzzled her head closer to mine. The weeks flew by in a blur as preparations unfolded for the upcoming trip the following day. Supplies were gathered, leadership briefed. I never imagined how many supplies would be needed for such a mission, though I hadn't really accounted for the extended stay aboard the cruiser while I conducted my reconnaissance and land acquisition. I found myself sitting in one of many meetings concerning the mission at hand. We had decided on acquiring land somewhere near Alpine, Texas. It was believed I would be far enough away from my usual locations to avoid someone recognizing me, and the land in and around the area was relatively cheap in comparison. It would also be remote enough that we could operate in relative secrecy. The mysterious lights between Marfa and Alpine would also help disguise the coming and going of our shuttles. Both Frey and Graciques would accompany me to the surface. I tried to argue against the decision, but everyone overruled me, including Shay, at whom I glanced in betrayal. The shuttle would also remain on the surface in stealth mode in case we needed to leave in a hurry. It would also house any supplies we needed. The list of supplies, oddly enough, comprised no more than 2 weeks of rations. Much of the cargo space would contain military-grade weapons, a lot of them, and an extensive medical supply. It would be cramped for a crew of 3, but unavoidable. The one real danger, in their view, stemmed from the prying eyes of the McDonald Observatory in Fort Davis. According to records on the surrounding area, the telescopes at the observatory employed optical and infrared spectroscopy. Both posed little threat to the shuttle's stealth technology, but Fre refused to take any more chances than they already were. Our quarters remained the same as before. This time, the cargo bay had been converted to a suitable living area, adequate for our growing family. Chiari even had her own room, which she explored with a sense of adventurous glee. It wasn't large, barely big enough to accommodate the 2 small bedrooms, a shared bathroom, and common area. It was definitely a big change from the open bay we used after my claustrophobic episode the last time we traveled in the cramped captain's quarters. We used what free time we had watching the stars blur past while our daughter ran wild like some feral cat. Chiari possessed an endless curiosity that, once the crew had grown accustomed to her, prompted them to show her what they were doing and explain the details. At one point, an electronic engineer demonstrated the effects electricity had on her fur. She studied her fur in wide-eyed amazement as it stood completely erect. Whether intentional or not, the engineer became her favorite person throughout the journey. She often snuck off to see what he was up to, on the off chance he would show her some new wonder. He rarely disappointed. When Shay or I would track her down, we would find her lying on her back under some console, studying the maze of wiring. When we approached, she would gesture for us to crawl under the console with her so she could demonstrate her growing knowledge. The tech would just swivel his ears attentively and wave off our concerns. She had even begun calling him Uncle Scree. By the time we dropped out of hyperspace near the edge of Neptune, she had memorized every kind of wiring by color and function, to my surprise. I contemplated how much I would miss while on Earth. The first deployment away from my family was expected to last at least 6 months. With the rate at which she was learning, I half expected her to be taming electrical gremlins by the time I returned to the ship. I hugged her close to my side as the massive swirling ice blue and white planet loomed into view. I had seen AI renderings of the planet, but they didn't do it justice. Odin's messenger skimmed the edge of the ice rings. White shimmering discs of light reflected the ship's lights back at them as they glided past. Little else illuminated the passage of ice, since the planet itself produced very little light. Definitely not enough to provide such a dazzling display. Much of the rings comprised little more than dust particles that barely registered against the inertium shielding, interrupted only by the rare clump not much bigger than a car. Entering near the ring's edge had been decided on because it provided the best cover, just in case someone on Earth or a satellite happened to be looking our way. "Pretty," Chiari whispered softly, as if afraid her voice would shatter the tranquility of it all. "It is amazing," I stated, pulling her closer. "I'm the first human to witness the planets up close, and I get to share the experience with you and your mother." A tear streamed down the right side of my face, unbidden and unexpectedly. Shay gave me a worried look, but I just shook my head. "I'm good. I'm just excited to share the experience with you both." I squeezed her hand hard enough to trigger her claws, which dug into the back of my own hand. The ship continued to accelerate through the system with minimal thrust. It was an insanely slow pace that would require nearly 3 weeks to reach our destination. The consolation stemmed from the times I spent with Chiari and Shay. Watching the planets drift past the Astrometrics Observatory each time we orbited the bodies to both increase speed and decelerate for our approach. Uranus proved to be an unremarkable snowball with glittering rings. We orbited Jupiter purely as a survey of the beginning stage of mining operations. We briefly matched orbital trajectory with Io to observe mining craft blasting sections of the yellow moon with powerful invisible lasers. The only evidence of their existence was the plumes of dust that erupted from the impact sites. Due to the orbit of Mars, we could not glimpse the red planet that so fascinated Earth. Odin's messenger timed its approach to settle into the backside of the moon when it was directly between the ship and Earth. The backside was heavily cratered, with many large enough to easily conceal the ship from the prying eyes of any passing probe. The dust that billowed up from the surface blanketed the ship in the gray-white powdery material, easily masking it from visual instruments. Satellites littered the surface, some the size of mailboxes, others equivalent to a large refrigerator, far more than had been anticipated given the limited public information about the far side. Odin's messenger deployed small satellites of its own, which assumed orbit around Earth. They weren't much, just small orbital objects not much bigger than a shoebox. Each positioned themselves in relative proximity to one of the many existing communication satellites deployed by a commercial space company. Mersch's comms officer had devised the idea to overcome the interference of having the moon obstructing the line of sight needed for a secure channel. "Are you sure the satellites won't be detected?" I asked worriedly during the final brief. The young officer dipped her ears in offense. "Your technology is primitive," she retorted. "They will never spot them." I nodded appreciatively. The meeting lasted almost another hour before we adjourned to pack. Shay and I walked side by side, watching our daughter saunter ahead of us with increasing confidence, chasing shadows as if they were witless prey. "I know it's my idea, but I'm apprehensive about returning," I confessed softly. Shay swiveled her ears curiously. "Why? Earth is your home." I laced my fingers with hers. "My home is with you and Kiari. I'm no longer the same person I was when I left, emotionally or physically." I flashed my teeth to emphasize my point. "So many things could go wrong." Shay nodded, understanding. "You will have Fre and Kess with you if anything goes wrong." "I know, but Kess isn't invested in this," I remarked. "Her loyalties lie with the Krathan military." I glanced up at Shay wearily. "What if my plans don't succeed? I'm not a leader." Shay's expression softened. "Then we will pursue a direct approach. Only a leader could have brought us where we are." "And where are we exactly?" I asked. "I'm a fugitive from Earth. You're shunned because of me." She halted suddenly. "We are free. You will go to Earth and find us the people we need to win this war. I will remain here, gathering intel for you. Together, we will prevail." We resumed our way to our quarters for one last night together for months to come. The shuttle hummed pleasantly within the docking bay. When we arrived the next morning, it was a sleek craft with smooth dark lines, converted from a military drop carrier designed to transport a dozen soldiers onto the battlefield. I had examined the specifications over the past week. Despite its outward appearance, it was not a nimble craft by any stretch of the imagination. It was built for sheer, stubborn survivability in some of the worst conditions the Krathan could conceive. It wasn't lacking in firepower, however. It possessed air-to-air tactical lasers that could easily disable human aircraft, thermal drop charges with enough power to incinerate 2 city blocks and anything within. The inside held crates of food, medical supplies, and ammunition. 3 bunks anchored against each wall, folded up and secured. A makeshift bathroom had been erected in the corner. It offered all the basic necessities except one: privacy. I sighed deeply, hefted my duffel, and stepped through the drop door. The hatch began to close the instant my boots crossed the threshold. There were no goodbyes, no fanfare, no tears. Fre and Kess were already in the pilot's compartment when I arrived. Shay and Kiari were on the bridge, monitoring our flight path and watching us lift away through the view screens. Nothing subtle marked the departure. The entire hull shuddered under the immense power of the engines designed to lift weight. I instinctively grabbed for the nearest crate labeled explosives to steady myself. No windows offered a view. Of course, no soldier truly wished to witness the hellscape they were about to descend upon, no matter what they told themselves. I stumbled over to one of the bunks, lowered it, and strapped in for the ride. Travel from the surface of the moon to Earth's outer atmosphere required little time. Only about 30 minutes of smooth operation passed before Kess's voice sounded from the cockpit. "Hold on!" No sooner had the warning come than the ship shuddered violently once again from the turbulence of re-entry. With my enhanced sense of smell, I could have sworn I detected the outer hull burn, emitting an odor not unlike that of an electrical fire. The instant we cleared the mesosphere, the shuttle seemed to drop out of the air. My stomach decidedly insisted on remaining in space since it climbed into my throat in an attempt to escape. I wasn't sick exactly, but the lump hung in the back of my throat just above my esophagus, while my head spun wildly. When my mind stepped off the roller coaster it had just been on, I could feel the shuttle bank gently to the right before dropping unexpectedly once more, and then banking back to the left sharply. The engines roared a short time later when gravity reasserted itself during our landing. I felt the shudder of the landing struts impacting the ground. The hull bobbed gently against the shock absorbers before stilling. I remained sitting until the engines died and Fre shuffled through the entry from the cockpit. She entered a series of codes and the door hissed open into a plume of steam, engulfing the ship as it rapidly cooled in the chilled air. "Welcome to Earth," she stated cheerily before stepping out, her sidearm drawn. The pressure my legs encountered caused me to stumble slightly. Over a year in space left me unprepared for the gravitational pull. Lifting my body felt akin to carrying a full combat loadout. Not difficult, but immediately noticeable. Fre surveyed our surroundings suspiciously. Nothing existed around for miles, of course. We had intentionally chosen a remote location for our base of operations. Any wildlife that might have been present was long gone, frightened by the whine of the engines. Kess walked up beside me and inhaled deeply. "The air is dry," she remarked. "I can also smell rain coming." As if responding to her observation, a crack of bright light flashed in the distance, followed by a soft rumbling. We stepped out into the cool air that carried a gentle breeze ahead of the oncoming storm. Lightning struck the ground in a curtain of brilliant light. I recalled seeing such storms years ago while attending college in the neighboring town. They were fast, delivered lots of water, and concluded just as quickly as they began. We watched in fascination as the storm approached. No tree obstructed our view, only dry brush that tumbled past ahead of the wind. Lightning struck within meters of the ship, announcing it was time to retreat back to the shuttle for the evening. Daylight was still 6 hours away, and we needed rest before my journey to town.
Join us for more from Worlds Collide.